Welcome to the book review. Today we are getting into them really foundational stuff, looking at the work of a sociologist named Herbert Blumer.
And Blumer is so important because he wasn't just off for another theory. He was really launching a radical critique of how social science even studies people.
Exactly. Our sources today are all about his big ideas, symbolic interactionism, or SI. And his argument is that for social science to be, actually empirical, we have to stop trying to cram the messy reality of human life into these neat little boxes.
Right? He's basically saying the tools we're using, like variable analysis or public opinion polls, they're not just a little off. They fundamentally misunderstand what it means to be human.
So our mission today is to unpack SI and really get Blumer's argument for why these elegant methods are so misleading. It's because they skip over the most critical step interpretation.
You know, if you've ever looked at a chart showing a simple correlation and just had that gut feeling, wait, it can't be that simple. Blumer is the guy who explains that gut feeling.
Okay, let's do it. So symbolic interactionism, you said it rests on three simple premises. What's the starting point?
The starting point, premise one, is that human beings act toward things based on the meanings those things have for them.
And things isn't just physical objects, right?
Not at all. It's everything. A chair, another person, an ideal like freedom, an institution like your job. How you act is driven by what that thing means to you.
Okay, that feels intuitive enough. Action follows meaning. But then the big question is, where does the meaning come from?
And that's premise two. The meaning of things is socially derived. It emerges from your interactions with other people. Meaning is a social product. It's not in the object itself.
So a chair isn't inherently a sitting thing. It's a sitting thing because we've all sort of agreed it is.
Exactly. If we all get together and decide that chair is now a priceless sculpture, our entire way of acting toward it changes instantly.
That puts the group, the interaction, right at the center. Which brings us to the third premise. And this is the one that really messes with traditional research.
This is the big one. Premise three is that these meanings are handled and modified through an interpretative process. This isn't just you passively applying a meaning, you learn. It's an active two-step conversation you have with yourself.
A conversation with yourself. Okay, can you walk me through that? Let's use an example.
Sure, think about a red traffic light. The social meaning is stop. So you're driving, you see it. Step one is you indicate the thing to yourself. You have a little internal chat. Okay, that's a red light. That means I need to stop.
So you're not just reacting, you're actively pointing it out to yourself.
You're pointing it out to yourself. And then comes step two, you use that self-talk to check the situation. You might hold the act of stopping in suspension for a split second.
What are you checking for?
You're checking the context. Is there a black ice on the road? Is an ambulance screaming up behind me? Is that person behind me not paying attention? And based on that, you might revise your acts, slam on the brakes, or even transform the meaning. If you're rushing to the hospital, red light might mean slow down, check for traffic, and then go.
So the interpretation is this creative process that happens in that tiny gap between the stimulus and the response.
It is a formative process. And that gap is what most social science completely ignores.
This changes everything. If we're all doing this constantly, what does that mean for these big, stable ideas like culture or social structure?
Well, Blumer says that human society fundamentally exists in action. It's all the millions of things people are doing as they meet situations. So concepts like culture or social structure, those aren't the starting point. They are just derivations. They're the patterns that emerge from all that ongoing activity.
Wait, hold on a second. That's a huge claim. So you're saying a very rigid social structure, like, I don't know, the hierarchy in the military doesn't actually cause the behavior.
It feels like it does. But Blumer would say its stability is an achievement. It has to be recreated every single day. The rules only work because people are constantly interpreting situations and choosing to act in line with that structure.
So the key insight is,
The key insight is that it's the social process that creates and upholds the rules, not the other way around. If you only study the rulebook, you're missing the engine. Asal, that makes so much sense. Okay, let's zoom back in on the individual. This internal conversation, this self-interaction, what does that imply about the human actor?
It implies the concept of the self. A human being, for Blumer, is an organism that can be an object of its own action. You can look at yourself and say, I'm a student, or I'm trying to be a better person. You then act toward the world based on who you've defined yourself to be.
And that's different from how most of psychology or sociology saw it at the time.
Massively different. The dominant view was the responding organism model, that the human is just a product of outside forces. Stimuli drives cultural roles, and things happen to you and you react. You're like a complex switchboard.
So conventional research says we put in stimulus X and we get out response Y.
Exactly. And the SI view says the human is an acting organism. You construct your action through that process of self-indication. And action isn't just a release of some preloaded tendency, it's forged in the moment.
And this is where Blumer's critique of methodology really begins. If the world is that complex, what's the number one rule that science has to follow?
His cardinal principle is that you have to respect the obdurate character of the empirical world.
The obdurate character?
The stubbornness of reality. The world is what it is. It's the final test, not your elegant theory, not your beautiful method. You have to bend your method to fit reality, not the other way around.
And he says most social scientists do the opposite. He calls it social philosophizing.
He does because they force the world to fit their pre-made models. And the biggest offender in his view is what he calls variable analysis. Find that for us.
It's the approach that tries to boil down all the richness of human life into a few isolated variables. Variable X causes variable Y. They want to find a simple, fixed relationship.
But that sounds like the goal of science, right? To find clear, predictable patterns?
It is, but the clarity comes at the cost of being wrong. The huge glaring flaw is that variable analysis it ignores the entire interpretative process that happens between variable X and variable Y.
It pretends that black box in the middle doesn't exist.
Or it assumes the black box is, totally generic and predictable, that the meaning is just automatically applied.
The source gives a great example, a study measuring an economic depression and the rate of divorce. If you just draw a line between those two variables, what are you missing?
You're missing everything that actually matters. A depression isn't one thing. It's losing a job. It's arguments about money. It's fear about the future. All of those events have to be interpreted by a husband and wife. Stress doesn't automatically cause divorce. It causes people to redefine their relationship, their commitments, their future. That redefinition is the real cause, and variable analysis is completely blind to it.
So it mistakes a correlation for the actual mechanism.
That's it exactly.
Let's drill down on another one. He attacks the concept of an attitude. I mean, that's huge in marketing, in politics, measuring someone's tendency to act. Why is that a flawed idea for Blumer?
Well, for one, it's just empirically vague. You can't actually point to an attitude in the real world, and after thousands of studies, we still don't really have a clear, cumulative understanding of what it even is.
But the bigger problem is theoretical, right?
The most fundamental problem is that it assumes your action is just a release of some pre-organized tendency. It completely bypasses the fact that you construct the act in the moment through interpretation. You're trying to measure a static thing to explain a dynamic process. It just doesn't work.
This perfectly sets up our next segment, looking at how this all goes wrong in the real world. Let's talk about public opinion polling. We see it every day, but Blumer says it gets public opinion completely wrong. How?
It's a direct result of the method. A poll treats society as an aggregation of disparate individuals who all have equal weight, A, which for their sample is mathematically true.
True for the sample, but a total fiction for how society actually functions. A. So what's the reality that the poll misses?
It misses that society is made up of functional groups, corporations, unions, churches, activist organizations, and these groups have vastly different levels of power, prestige, and influence. Real public opinion, the kind that actually shapes policy, is formed in the clash between these groups. What matters to a key decision maker, a senator, a CEO isn't a random collection of individual opinions. It's the pattern of views coming from these powerful groups.
So a lawmaker doesn't weigh the opinion of one random citizen the same as an opinion coming from a massive lobbying group that represents 1,000,000 people.
Of course not. They assess opinions based on their backing, on their influence. They're asking who is saying this and what can they do. A poll strips all that away. It gives you an anonymous tally where the head of the Chamber of Commerce accounts for exactly the same as the college student. It measures volume, but it completely misses power.
And that explains why polls are so good at predicting elections, but often so bad at predicting what will happen with this specific policy debate.
Precisely because an election is one of the very rare instances where individuals do act as a mass of equals. One person, one vote. The method happens to match that specific social act, but researchers then wrongly apply that success to all these other areas of life where action is organized by power and influence.
It's a classic case of the tool shaping the problem. And we see this with media effects research too, right?
Same exact problem. They try to isolate one variable like a TV show and measure its effect on a fixed audience. But in the real world, the media message is always changing and the audience is always changing again.
They're missing the interpretation.
They're missing the interpretation. The effect of any media depends on how it's collectively defined by your reference groups, your family, your friends, your colleagues, Blumer says. The more you try to make a study neat and tidy in a lab, the less it tells you about the messy real world.
Okay, so if variable analysis is out, if these elegant models are flawed, what does Blumer suggest we do instead? How do we actually study the world properly?
We have to use what he calls naturalistic procedures, which really just means getting back to the real world. The first step is what he calls exploration.
Which sounds like getting your hands dirty.
It is. It means you have to develop a deep, intimate first-hand familiarity with whatever you're studying. You go in assuming you know nothing. No theory, no checklist can replace just knowing what is actually going on the ground. So if you want to know why a marketing campaign failed, you don't just send out a survey.
No, you go and spend time with the people it was aimed at. You listen to how they talk about it. You see what meaning they gave it, which is almost never the meaning the marketing team intended. Exploration is about discovering what the real questions are before you even try to answer them. Okay, so you've done your exploration. You're deeply immersed. How do you get from that rich description to actual analysis?
That's the second step, inspection. Inspection is an intensive, focused look at your concepts. If you're studying something like morale in an office, you don't start with a textbook definition. You take all the instances of what looks like morale from your exploration,
and you kind of turn it over in your mind, like that strange object you mentioned earlier.
It's exactly like that. You look at it from all angles. You compare cases. You ask yourself, what are the essential components of this thing in this specific context? You let reality sharpen your concept instead of forcing reality into a blunt, preconceived box.
So the goal of the methodology is to make your concepts fit the world, not the other way around.
That is the entire point. It's a constant process of testing your ideas against the stubbornness of the empirical world itself.
This feels like such a fundamental challenge to so much of the research we see every day. The big takeaway for you, the listener, has to be this demand from Blumer. We have to stop treating people like passive responders. Society is something that is actively built every moment of every day through interpretation.
And the challenge for you is to start noticing when an analysis you're reading or hearing is just, social philosophizing using these big, vague concepts without really getting into the messy process, versus when it's true empirical science that has actually done the hard work of explanation and inspection.
And we have one final provocative thought for you to take away. Blumer's theory says that even your most stable, repetitive actions, your morning commute, a weekly family dinner, have to be formed anew every single time through this process of interpretation.
So think about that. How much of what feels like mindless automatic behavior is actually the result of constant tiny internal self-negotiations? The stability of your world isn't a given. It's a constant achievement that you are performing right now.
Something to think about the next time you stop at a red light.
Absolutely.
Thanks for reviewing book with us. See you next book review.